What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here today, and I'm excited to show off an updated premium deck profile for Thavas G. Recently, it was actually official that all the Strides from History collection will persona flip and give you 2 gifts in addition of superior striding. And so now we can take this deck and assume that we actually have 2 Accel circles to work with when we do the play as well. So I'm going to explain the mindset behind it, compare it a little bit with Thavas already currently in the metagame, go over some of the specific card choices, show ride progression as well. Also some other suggestions and closing thoughts that I would recommend for you to try out from this starting template. So let's get right into it.
I'm also a METAFY coach that has helped numerous players get their results in tops. I actually help with the standard, V Premium, and Premium formats, and I help you prepare for tournament preparation as well, so that way you get your results that you're looking for and helping out with your goal. I just want to help the community grow, and feel free to book a session with me. And also to help you out more, I also just came out with the book How to Win Cardfight Tournaments, Break Through Your Mental Barrier, and Topping Trading Card Game Tournaments. And so it's available for Kindle, paperback, and also the audiobook will be coming out soon. And it's the #1 new release as well. So I'm excited for you guys to see the content and value from it too and your results.
So with the winning image / mindset behind this deck, one of the biggest things that I wanted to focus is that if I can get away from the Thavas that we have currently in the metagame, such as like writing down back to grade 2, it would help open up the opportunities that we can see that this deck has potential wise. I think some players always kind of want to compare it to what exists, which is fine. But if you stay in that mindset where it's like, okay, you generate 2 Accel circles and you do a decent amount of attacks, that's what I already do, and then I'm able to write down back with V Thavas. And so I kind of wanted to see, like, okay, so what if we do go this route where it's more pure G? Is there maybe more advantages to it than we initially think after like play testing a bit and finding out what it can do? So this deck could evolve from either the V Thavas pure variant that we have, or a mix, or even the pure Thavas G variant. And so this is more focused on a pure Thavas G variant, where essentially we're going to use our Tidal-bore, which is a superior stride for Thavas specifically, the original one. And this allows us to get some advantage when it hits, but it also costs something to have additional attacks. And so with the Accel circles, if we use Accel 2, for example, we're going to be able to draw 2 cards right off the back. So we don't really lose advantage. In fact, as long as you're able to pay the cost for stride, which you need a grade 3, and then you'll get 2 cards back because of the double Accel circle generation. Lastly, just to reemphasize, and I want to give a shout out to Duke Cardfight too. It's like, what if you just actually, regardless if you go first or second, you just go into Tidal-bore and generate your Accel circles from there. And then after that, it's just like your strides for moving forward, which I think is a good thing, because we are so fixated sometimes to go into Gembold. It's like Gembold's so really good as a first stride, and don't get me wrong, it's, you know, 9 times out of 10 it's a very solid stride to go into as first stride. But I really wanted to see what else can we do first stride, even if it's worth it, or maybe it's just different from Gembold. So this deck will be geared to not only going first, but also going second, and I'll explain the little things that can help you when you're going first or going second as well. So into the card choices, always keep in mind the Tidal-bore is going to give us 2 Accel circles, and we have 2 rearguard columns to work with. So at a bare minimum, we're going to see 5 attacks, including the Vanguard. And then because of its own skill, it's going to call something else, which can also produce the 6th attack, which we also have restanders later in this deck choice too. So we can get 6 to 7 attacks pretty easily as well. And so with that mindset, we are playing 4 copies of Thavas G. Thavas G is really what you want to see, because you need to write it, you need to do the pay of the costs, and go into the superior stride. Its break stride skill is okay. It might have been power crap at this point, but essentially when your unit attacks for the 4th battle, regardless of your Vanguard or rearguard attack, you can choose 3 of your opponent's rearguards, and they choose 1 and kill it off by retirement. And so little by little, you're diminishing their field essentially. But again, you might be more fixated to compare it to Jumbo, where usually we pop 3. But it's just kind of nice. And then moving forward, if this is continually your Vanguard, your Alexandros, your Lambros, your Ferragus will also be able to retire during that 4th battle. The GB2 skill isn't really used often, but it's a bit of a guard restriction of grade 0s, which gets over the PG draws, for example. It also gets crit as well on top of that, but it's still weak, so unless we power up our Vanguard, then it's worth it. But usually it's just better to stride anyway. Having the extra copies of Thavas too is also like, you need the same copy to do the Progenitor Dragon as well, so that's also appreciated. Now into more of the utility grade 3s, you can go the route where you can have more Vanguard base grade 3s, such as like the Accel ones, such as Genovius or V Thavas. But I decided to go more rearguard base, and so we're playing 1 copy of Rule of Thavas, 1 copy of Benedict, 1 copy of Usurp, and then 1 copy of the doll card that's coming out soon for the Festival Collection, I believe. And as you can see, there's a lot of variety here, and you may have seen some of the cards prior to my other Thavas G profile. But essentially, thanks to this Regalis order card that we have, you can only have one Regalis order in your deck as well. But essentially, you're able to search both either your deck or your drop zone for 2 grade 3s or grade 4s, and then you superior call the grade 3s and you add the grade 4s to hand. So in this deck, you're going to be searching for these grade 3s essentially, and it's really a +1 if you think about it, because you activate it and get 2 cards back essentially. And what's really, really, really nice is that in the late to mid game, this is really a revival card. We're able to bring back these grade 3s that we needed, especially Benedict or Ruler Thavas, because they really serve as our restanders. And I'll highlight a little bit with those too, because with Ruler Thavas, it's a GB2 skill, but because we go into Tidal-bore and Persona flips immediately, you're automatically GB2. So this can attack for the first wave or the fourth wave, and you're able to restand. This is 11k, and if you put on an Accel 2, it'll be 16. So keep those numbers in mind. And also with like, if you're going first, your opponent's going to be a grade 2, so more than likely they're going to be a 10k base grade 2 at most, unless they play the 12k grade 2s. So this is going to hit. And what's really nice about Benedict, it's similar in the sense that it's a recenter, but it's free. This is literally a grade 3 Tidal Assault, and essentially 10k base. When it attacks at the end of the battle, you can restand it by -5k. If you put this on the Accel 2 circle now, it's 15 and then 10k. So guess what? Your first and second battle, Benedict can actually attack and hit the Vanguard too, even against Force Vanguards, which is really nice too. So your Tidal-bore can still be the third battle, and then you can still prep for the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th battles properly with proper power scaling, depending on triggers or maybe just like power-ups and stuff like that too. So the new other addition that I'm trying out is Usurp, and this might be a little bit like kind of weird. Seeing this in Aquaforce is also like something not seen as often. We usually see this in like Neonectar, Grand Blue, and other decks like Great Nature, for example. But essentially it has a drop skill, and so whenever your grade 3 or greater is placed, you can call this to rearguard. It's a returning rearguard that you can use, especially with the Tidal-bore synergy. One, because you can pay the cost of stride, which is another benefit of having more grade 3s. In fact, in G era, we used to play 7 to 8 grade 3s typically as well, just to make sure we're able to consistently stride with 1 card as cost. So keep that in mind. But essentially, you can discard this as stride fodder. Then when you place your Tidal-bore or any other stride, this can call itself. You have a rearguard that you can work with. Tidal-bore can call over a card too to have more attacks extending as well. So you can call over this Usurp and not really lose advantage in the long term. So that way you can always get it back later on too. So it's just nice having that extra body, especially when you're like in that moment, you haven't really generated as much advantage. So you appreciate like any +1 that you can get from it. So this helps, and it's 13k. So it can hit by itself, and then later on, if they ride a 13k Vanguard, it can still hit by itself. And then lastly, real quick with Benedict and Ruler Thavas again, they're restanders that you could also use in the later game with Alexandros and Veleos. Obviously, with Alexandros turns, they're going to be big beefy beaters as restanders, so I definitely recommend these can be your finishers. And so just having the card like the Regalis order, being able to fetch them when you need them to, is super helpful. Onto the grade 2s, we're playing 4 copies of Repressed Strike Dragon. This is the new promo. In fact, in my prior Thavas profile, we did not have access to this promo just yet. And I recommend playing 3 for a couple reasons. One, it has consistency because of its second skill at the beginning of the right phase. If you are a grade 1 or less Vanguard, you can discard it. Look for the top 5 cards for a grade 2 or less, add it to your hand. So this can help you ride a proper grade 1, another grade 2 if you have access of these two, so it helps with consistency. And also the first skill is much more needed now because it has a level of aggression that you can use on Vanguard circle at grade 2 turn, or you can save it for like your Tidal-bore turn or your Alexandros turn. And essentially it's a restander, and if you hit the 4th battle or more, it'll get an additional 10k until the end of the turn. And so that's super helpful because you can make numbers easily when you're on Tidal-bore. So the synergy is really good because Tidal-bore wants you to be 3rd battle. This guy would ideally want you to be 4th battle, so that way you can benefit from the power up too as well. So by himself, he's 19k, and if your opponent's still in a 9k grade 2 and they haven't gotten any triggers, you can still hit. And if they did get a trigger, you can still hit on top of that as well. It's just like demanding more shield essentially if they didn't get a trigger. It gets even more stronger if you put triggers on it too. So if you saw with Tidal-bore or your other strides, you could put crits or draws, whatever types of triggers to really push harder for that deck as well. Another cool thing about this card too, what I like to do, since like in the early game you're not doing much, like in turn 2, you can ride this as your Vanguard and then actually be able to call a booster behind it so you can hit it over easily. But not only that, you can to discard a card, so it could be something like that's not really needed at that point. It can set up your drop zone, but it also goes through another drive track, so that way you go an extra card deeper into your deck before you get to grade 3, and sometimes that might be the difference of getting your grade 3 Thavas before that. Or if you get triggers, it can be really in your advantage as well. So as a reference from my prior deck profile, I was also playing Coral Assault back then. You know, one of the biggest things that I saw when playing this deck, you need some hand back. And really, Coral Assault is there for what it does. At the end of the turn, 4 battles or more, this can go into Soul and draw you a card. That way you can still have a healthy hand size and still have some aggression, because it is a 24k beater on its own or a 29 on the Accel 2 circle. So being on Tidal-bore, and if you're doing multiple attacks, you want them to scale up. So that way, even if they have a grade 3 heal to give themselves plus 10k, or if they hit a trigger in the damage zone, this can still hit over at least 1 at that point. And if you're doing the Tidal-bore skill, this can be something where you kind of sneak in if you can still hit, and then just call the Coral Assault to a circle. And by then, this will be the 4th battle at least, and this can actually just go back into Soul and give you a card back. So you really don't lose advantage. So thanks to the Accel circle generation, Coral Assault just got even better than it was before, where I assumed that we didn't get some. And the synergy is there too, as I found out that I started wanting to go back to Pursuit Assault. And at first, I actually took out this card. I was playing 4 Algos and a couple of Nicolauses too. I put them on the screen too, because there's the Algos engine where essentially if you ride over it, you can check the top 7 and call any Aquaforce card that you can do, which is really nice. But it only works on Vanguard, and I found out that even though you have Algos and Repress as really good Vanguard targets to ride on turn 2, moving forward, Algos is pretty useless. And yes, you can use Nicolas to potentially +1, but you're only getting like a 5k shield. Algos by itself isn't doing much because it's 10k, so it doesn't even hit 11k moving forward, because Vanguards are going to be either 11k or 12k or 13k, so you need a booster. It's just really like kind of like useless fodder in that sense. So I wanted to see if there was other options, and I revisited Pursuit Assault because you get 2 Accel circles right off the back, and Pursuit Assault gets +10 because he sees 2 circles. So he's 19k starting at grade 3 turn. So one, he can hit over a trigger threshold against a 9k grade 2 Vanguard, but also like if you go into Ferragus later on, it'll get even stronger. And then if you put this on the Accel circle while being 19k, it'll be 24, which will hit over a trigger even against the 11 or 12 or 13k Vanguards too on top of that. So it made me think like, I do need a beater. I need to make these attacks count, because just poking smoke pokes isn't really going to be worth it. And I think that's where people feel like, I don't think it's worth going to this way where I can just do original Thavas right down back to grade 2 and limit my opponent in that sense. And I can kind of get away with the small advantage and then also the bigger scaling of Pursuit Assault and also Coral Assault. But this deck can also use them in that fashion too. You can also rest 2 cards and Soul Blast 1 to draw a card. One thing that I have considered is playing Narissa to help with that, and it makes Narissa also a beater to work with in this deck. But there are a couple options that I do want to show you guys too as well, so you can try it out for yourself. But essentially, Pursuit and Coral Assault are your beaters, alongside with Repress Strike Dragon on being a restander on top of that. And then the last grade 2s that I'm playing is Alania. And Alania is there to 2 reasons: to build your main phase or even like extend your battle phase. And so if your opponent gives you Counterblast, you can not only have restanders on the field already, and Tidal-bore can call a restander if needed, you can call Alania and get a restander back, or reuse a restander on the field currently as well. So, or just a unit in general. So for example, if you call over a Pursuit Assault or a Coral Assault or even a Repress Strike Dragon during the battle phase, you can immediately call it back. It's an eligible target. Or if you rode something that's useful on grade 2 turn, now you could fetch it because you do Soul Blast as well. And it gets +5k, so it's even better with restanders because they really take advantage of it too. Keep in mind, this is grade 2 or less, so you cannot revive Benedict, you cannot revive Ruler Thavas. That's why that Regalis order is actually appreciated, because it revives those cards. while this is more focused to the grade 2 or less cards that you have. So just depending on that, have your setup properly as well. For the grade 1s, we're playing 3 V Nikki and we're playing 1 G Nikki. So I'm still kind of debating on this too. The main reason with Nikki is because it helps with consistency of seeing your Thavas. So the V1 is that if you write it on Vanguard Circle, you could check the top 7 for Thavas. So that way you can get your Thavas G, because it so happens to be the same name as the V version. That's really cool, actually. The second skill, where you can rest it and bottom deck a unit card, it doesn't come up as often. I notice you don't run into soul issues unless you're really excessive somehow, but I don't see it as long as you're putting your coral salts into salt and also rewriting if need to. So the salt isn't really an issue. And then the G Nikki is there for, it can be a Stride Fighter for later. This does not count for Tidal-bore, for example. That's been rolled where you actually need the grades of grade 3 or more to pay the cost for that stride. You can use your crit fodders in terms of your grade 1, like Nikki, or your crits, for example. So you want to make sure you have the proper grades. So that's why we upped the grade 3s as well. And G Nikki is there to search for the Thavas if you have another grade 3 in hand. So if you have your grade 3 heals, your Benedicts, your Ursups, or Regalis, you can reveal those cards, search your Thavas, and be good to go at that point too. So it was just another alternative to try out, because you really do need that Thavas as well, and it's actually not a bad way to search it for it. The other thing that I'm considering is that I might even like try taking the Nikki package out completely, and mainly because we do play 3 Baragios, and that ratio can change too. It really just depends on how the consistency of the deck goes too, because Baragios helps a lot more in these types of builds, because you need grade 3s to not only ride with your main dude, but also pay for the cost of stride. So it's even more important, and I sound like I'm repeating myself, but I want to stress that out, emphasize that out. And what's really cool about Baragios is that it can set up your drop zone. So if you get this, let's say Ursup in your hand, or you add it from your deck, you can discard it, and then that's like free fodder essentially. And so it helps with consistency. If you're going second, it's even more important to get your grade 3 heals to survive, because there's going to be other decks that are either very strong or also do multi-attack just like you, if not more. So my assumption is that this meta game, with History Collection, I feel like the Accel clans right off the back got the most advantage, because just the way Accel 2 works. So just having Baragios to survive against those with grade 3 heals is very appreciative. And with more defensive resources, I am playing Rolox as well. This might change too, because there's Connolly being a errata as well, where it's no longer a counterblast when you call it. I think Connolly might be something that we play literally 3 or 4 of too as well. So that's something big. So always keep that in mind too. Rolox a PG when you're grade 2 or less too. So it's great going second, and if you want to stay at low damage if you're going first, that works too. The last grade 1 that I'm playing is Peeker. So Peeker is also getting an errata as well. And essentially, errata is that basically when your Vanguard is attacked and it's 11k or less, this will trigger and basically make it a 13k for the rest of the turn. Super helpful, because now there was a fear of like, oh no, my Vanguard's less than 13k or 12k now. And they're gonna poke with certain numbers, because even in G era there was cards that just hit for that magic number 11k. So little things like that, right? And the other thing that I really like about this is that they give it resist. So you can put this early on, not have to worry about it. As long as you have GB1, you can have your Vanguard be 13k essentially. But you can also later on have this as an attacker that has resist. You have cards like Alexandros, or you have like Faragas that can move it to an open Accel circle and give it plus 10k. And now it's another unit that they have to kind of deal with, and they can't like, you know, kill it with some kind of disruptive play too. So that's something that to be mindful, and I'm trying it out. But I think honestly I might change this 4 out for Hanali, just because of the meta game that I'm thinking that it might turn out. Onto the remaining grade 0s and triggers, of course. Playing your V starter, you want to make sure you do that, because what's really cool too is that you're going to get the additional ticket shield that's plus 20k. This is for if you're going second. So that's super big. For the heal triggers, I am playing 3 of the grade 3 heals. You want to survive, as I mentioned, and 1 Refit Sailor. This is the blue wave. They're also getting a errata where essentially they have 15k shield and 10k power up as well. You can use the old ones too if you're curious too. So if you have like shiny SPs, you know, feel free to use them. Unfortunately, this card doesn't come in SP, but that's for Petros. So this allows you to countercharge when you G-guard, or you can soul charge. 9 times out of 10, you're going to countercharge, and so this is helpful to make Ionis free, or if you use a different G-guard, now you can just countercharge, essentially. So it's something to work with, and I only play one because you need another heal in the drop zone to bind both of them and activate the skill. So that's why I play the 3-1 ratio, so that way you can actually just be able to benefit from that too. And what's really cool with the grade 3 heals, because they're also better if you use them in the early game, they're already going to be in the drop because you use them. So then once you see Refet Sailor, it's live, essentially. To follow up with that, we're playing 4 draw PGs. You can play Elementaria Sanctitude as well if you have the room. I'm still trying to figure out with Aqua Force, because I've tried it before, but I like this, that if I'm going to play draws anyway, I might as well have the PG draws at that point. So this helps with advantage. This also helps defensively, and to kind of go with that, Petros has been also errata, and Petros not only is 15k shield but also 10k power up. Defensively, when it's checked, it acts as a draw trigger, so that way you in a sense have 8 draw triggers defensively at least. And then with the crit pressure, you still have it there, which is really nice. And this can go into your soul and give your Vanguard with Thavas in the name, plus 5k. So this can go into your stride turns, of course, because your heart is Thavas. And this is a card that you can also put on the Accel 2 circle, be 9k poke, and then when Tidal-bore attacks, they can go into soul, give you a card back, and then you draw another card, and then maybe it's a better target to call for Tidal-bore, so you can extend more attacks as well. So there's cool synergy with that too. You could also rest this with Pursuit of Soul pretty easily too, so that way you get some advantage, and this goes into soul anyway, so then you'll get the soul back, and then it's like it doesn't hurt you if you boosted. And then we have 3 more crits with bumper shooters. So later on, you are going to need some crit stride fighters, because more than likely you're going to call your rearguard grade 3s that you have and use the Regalis, and then defensively use the grade 3 heals. The only card that you would pitch to stride that's grade 3 after you roll your Thavas G would be other copies of Thavas G. So it's just like having more crit stride fighter for those following turns just helps a lot. The other card that I'm trying out is the new OTs that are coming out for Festival Collection as well. So this one is different, and it's specific to where essentially when you drive check this, you can choose one of your rear guards that is stand, and it gets the following attack skills. So at rear guard, once per turn, at the end of the battle, this unit attack, stand this unit. And if you did not choose a card, for example, if you have no standing units, you can still draw a card and choose a card from your hand and call it to rear guard. So essentially this card promotes more attacks. So if you see this helps a restander more, or a unit that is a beater to restand. And then if you didn't have anything standing, then you just call a new card and go from there. It's again 100 million too if you see it. So it's a solid card to have more aggression in that sense too. And what's really cool is because it's 100 million, the restanding unit like can still hit if they damage check an OT themselves as well. So as long as you're able to hit like just enough for the number on top of the OT power up, you're good to go. Onto the stride. So I'll start out with the new stuff. So we have the Harmonics Messiah being errata too as well. It has multiple effects, but most of the time you're going to use where once you get the ticket shield, you'll be able to reveal the card and get another ticket shield. So it helps you survive going second. It's also good for just pitching if you needed to, but more than likely you are going to use the 20k shield because it's 20k shield. So I would recommend playing at least one and have it in your G zone. And this is good against Lean Joker too. So if we have that matchup, it can become something. If you have some type of damage denial, you can get some damage and draw a card from it too. It's assuming if you have 2 or less, and there was no new damage essentially from the prior turn. So I think that was pretty cool. Bushi just being able to like, hey, you can add this to your G zone. You not only get some defensive options, but you also get some utility in certain situations that could come up. And they all package it in one card, which is really cool. I think that's really good card design. And 2 copies of Tidal-bore. So essentially you need 2 because you need to persona flip. Again, it's been errata. You flip a copy, your superior stride if you have G Thavas as your Vanguard during your main phase. And then of course you can actually get the Accel 2 circles, and that's super helpful. You draw 2, it's like Pot of Greed, and then on hit draw something, and you can call up to something from hand to rearguard circle. So this can help extend attacks, or if you feel like you're not going to hit, it's not worth it, you can keep the hand. At least you got some advantage at that point, and then work with whatever you have left on your field too as well. So I recommend a pair. I think moving forward, I don't think there's a reason for another pair. The only thing that would come to mind would be playing a 3rd copy just in case you want the unhit effect. But I feel like you would rather go into Lambros if you are damage denied in that sense, or if you need to go into like maybe a different stride, like I can hardly see going into a second Tidal-bore moving forward after that point, if that makes sense too. You can't do another pair and then like, oh, let me get 2 more Accel circles and have 4 now. You can't. It actually has to be like you've not gained gifts at all this fight. So there's something going around where like KSV, if they give you a force marker, now it screws you over. Which is like, wow, who would have saw that coming, right? But definitely keep that in mind. So that's why I would recommend just the pair. And I'll go over briefly some of the other strides. So 1 Ballerina, this helps with like the guard restriction. You could pop the Guardians and get something to attack. It's also not counterblast, and if you're decking out 2, you can still attack with your regards with that powerful effect. One of the things that I did as well is reduce Jumbo to 1, because like if you're going into Tidal-bore, you're not going to need to go into a second Jumbo by then. You may go into it once just to help build the field, retire and draw, and that shenanigans too. But other than that, more than likely you might go into Ferragus because it gives you more attacks. And here's the thing that I want to like kind of slow down a little bit too. When you have strides like Ferragus and Alexandros and Lambros and Valeos, because you did Tidal-bore first, let's say you went first, right? You're GB2. So if you didn't G-guard the following turn and you rode into this, you're already GB3. And then when they flip, it's GB4. So then essentially now cards like Ferragus and Alexandros see 3 cards face up in the G zone on your second stride, but sooner because you strode on grade 3 turn, essentially your first grade 3 turn going first. So just keep that in mind. And it helps with that moving forward too, especially if you G-guard it aggressively too. Now these units on second stride become even like more crazy. So essentially they're like your first stride turn if they would have happened that way. But just keep that in mind. Alexandros is probably one of your main ways to actually finish a game because you have so many restanders now. There might be an argument to have a second Alexandros too. So that way you can get a power up. But essentially the more cards face up in the G zone, the better and harder it is for them to guard against it. And you want to synergize with Ruler Thavas, Benedict, or Repressed Strike Dragon, which I found out that if you really think about it, Alexandros will be attacking the 3rd wave, and then perfectly Ruler Thavas or Repressed Strike Dragon will attack the 4th battle, which it's really where their skills pop off. So that's really humbling to see that. And if you get damage denied and you feel like this might be a better play, there's the Lambros still. I actually went into it recently just for playtesting. I'm like, wow, this brings back Lambroke days. Again, it's just the way that the deck's built, so we do play enough restanders, so cards like Lambros and Alexandros do shine more. And then also, just in case, you have Valeos as well to power lock at 11k so that you don't have to worry about OT. You could also call cards from your hand, extend more. So it's just really nice. Lastly, with the G guards, it's really standard right now. I don't know if I would change anything really. We had 2 Ionis. This becomes free if you use the Rafet. You have 2 Gaphilia because this could be great for countercharging, but it's one of your last results if possible. And you have your Ice Barrier that's free, and your Dynara that's a counterblast, and then depending on the 1st or 4 more, you get power, shield, or enough power to guard. So in this part of the video, I'm going to show off basically a ride progression. Assume that we're going first and this is your starting hand. So we do have our readable targets 1, 2, and 3. We have our Thavas G as well. So let's say you're drawing to turn, and this is what we draw. So we're going to go into our V Nikki. We'll draw from the starter first. We draw into this, and we check the top 7 for a Thavas. So let's see if we get it. This is 6, and then 7. We actually miss, so we whiff. It is what it is at that point, too. Then at this point, they'll give us a damage on their turn, and oh, wow, we got a Petro. So remember, when this goes into the damage zone, we actually get to draw cards. So, and we draw the heal, which is the blue wave one, which is great. So then now going into our turn, one of the things that if you have the Reprise Strike Dragon, I would recommend taking a damage. So that way when you draw for turn, you can ride it. And this is great because we drew a booster that's actually pretty more efficient as well. And we're going to call it behind the Vanguard. So I'm going to move my hand right over here. And you can do the top 5 for a Thavas again as well. Or a grade 3 actually. And ooh, we actually got the Regalis too. So this is actually a really good ride progression. So we're going to add that to hand and discard something else. So let's see. Oh, discard the extra Alania that we have. Then actually attack this way. And so the skill, since it's Vanguard, you're not only going to counterblast and restand it, but you're also going to have to discard a card. So from your cards, you can discard You can discard the heal, because if you know you're going to take some damage, you might as well take it and then save it for later. And then you G-guard later on to countercharge. Because we have the Regalis, this can search us to Great Things to call to Rearguard Circle. Unfortunately, that won't add to hand, so just be mindful of that. So I am going to keep this one, and then I'm going to actually discard this one. So we actually have a grade 3 that we can pitch for Stride at that point. And then this will be 8+9. Drive check, another copy of this guy. Since it restood, attack again, and a Coral Assault. So no triggers, but if we got triggers, it would have been more deadly. Let's just say they give us 2 damage. They hit a crit. Just for the sake of this ride progression. Stand and draw. So we draw into a crit fodder. Now, when you ride your grade 3 Thavas G, these don't work for Tidal-bore. Remember that. So I am going to do a couple things. So you can use Regalis first and then get your pieces to call. Or if you want to call them to the Accel circle, you want to do Tidal-bore first. We actually have some good pieces that we can call later on as well with the Regalis too on top of that. So I'm just going to do Tidal-bore first. So I'm going to discard with the grade 3. Then Tidal-bore flip. So double Accel circle. Draw 2. 1, 2. And this is our hand now. So assuming they're a grade 2, we could do a couple of things. We actually have a really good hand to work with. So I'm going to use Regalis first just to show that off. Oh, I just realized we have our Benedict in the damage zone. That kind of hurts. So we have to search a Serp or Rule of Thavas at this point. But ideally, you would have searched for the Benedict first. That would have been very helpful. Put Rule of Thavas here. You could put Serp here. Let's say we want to take advantage over Prize Strike Dragon. Still, we need to call a booster. We can call Ursa back here. Call Pursuit. Pursuit can Soul Blast 1. Rest these 2 to draw a card. We draw a Rollock. And we'll call a Coral Assault. So this is our field set up currently. So I'm going to dedicate the Counterblast to Repress and Rule of Thavas. And essentially what I'll do first is... So Rule of Thavas can be first. Again, you're GB2. So at the end of the battle, you can restand. This will be 16k. And then attack again because it's the weakest, 16k. And depending on what you have, since we have Rearguards that we can still call, if there's still like a 9k Vanguard, this can attack. This will be 19k. So this is the 4th battle. And then the Tidal-bore can attack next, and this is where you can drive check. Hopefully we get a trigger. We got one. Okay, perfect. So power here and draw 1 card from the draw PG. And then since it has the on hit, you can draw another card, which will draw a Pursuit Assault, and then call something. Now, looking at our hand, these are the cards that we can call. If we had more Counterblast, you can call Alania to get more an attacker, if it makes sense. But in this case, I'm going to call Pursuit Assault because it's our biggest. You can call over it into the Accel circle if you just want to go pure aggression. You are going to lose Rule of Thavas, but in this case, you want to push hard. So then the next thing you can do, because Reprise is this 4th battle more to get the power, you don't have to do this go just yet. And we did get the trigger, so this will be 29. This Pursuit can attack as the next and be 24. Then because we have 4 more rested units, this can also attack next as 29. And then this can attack boosted, use the skill Counterblast 1, get plus 10 additional, is 29 plus 4, 34. Restand and attack again. So if your opponent's a grade 2 with a 9k, these are all hitting like nice numbers too. Obviously, if they have a 10k, you may have to finagle a couple things, or they may not drop as much shield. But at this point, it really hurts. So we did a total of 2 ruler attacks, 2, then our Pursuit 3, Tidal 4, then call this 5, then 6, 7, 8. So we did 8 attacks in this example with 2 Counterblasts to spare, or to use. And your opponent's still a grade 2. So if they got any damage checks or any damage or grade 3 heals, they may have blocked a few of these small ones, but most of them are hitting over 1 threshold at least. And then at the end of the turn, you unstride. Coral Assault will go into Soul and draw you a card. And you also retire. I forgot that 4th battle you retire something. But essentially, this is your hand. You have 9 cards, which is actually not bad. You have 2 PGs, you have a grade 3 heal, I was gonna say you have a Rollock, but you're a grade 3. So you have a decent hand, and then you have a grade 3 to stride with next turn if needed to. and go from there. And that's pretty much the deck profile and the ride progression. I hope that helped like show like the extent that Thavas G can do. Obviously, there are other decks that can take more advantage of shenanigans. You can also do different variants too to beef up your field, or maybe less counterblast and things of that nature. But I just want to give you at least a template to work with, ride progression to see. And so for my suggestions, and I'll label this as like grades. So I'll start out with the grade 3s. You can use cards like Genovias, you can use Hydro Hurricane Dragon, you can use the Aminties to be rideable Accel Vanguards for later on as well. So you get more circles that way without needing to go into Fergagus. I've considered Hydro Hurricane Dragon and the Aminties because they also work as rearguards too. So that way the Regalis piece can search for them. If we are playing Hanalis and if people are leaving the Hanalis on the field, this stops this deck too because you only have so much counterblast available to you. So if you basically use a Hydro Hurricane Dragon to kill off a Hanali, that could be well worth it. But that assumes if you have like extra counterblast to work with, because you are already using a counterblast to like kill that off essentially. So there's some play testing to do at that point too. If you go through a hybrid build, you could play V Thavas at 3-1-2-2 ratio. I feel like that might be a little bit too clunky, but I'm not too sure. You can play more of a Thavas V build and then stick one Thavas G in it just in case you want to go into Tidal-bore first instead of doing a write down play. But I feel like if you're going to play Thavas V, you might as well commit to the write down at that point when it comes to your build. Great Sues, I've done Terrific Coil because it was a great unit to get you to the third battle being one card. But now we have Accel Circles, so we don't necessarily need a restander like that, and we have Regalis to search for like Ruler Thavas or Benedict that can help with that too. But now you can make cards for like Repress Strike Dragon or different Great Sues that you want to put in. I mentioned the Algos engine, the D Algos one. So if you ride it, you get check top 7, get an Aqua Force unit. Sometimes it's really nice. You can get a Pursuit Assault, you can get a Coral Assault, or Reprise, or some other combo piece that you need. And sometimes it's just like whatever you get. For me, if you're going to dedicate some space for that, it kind of takes away from the other flexibility that you can put into the deck build as well. So if you're going to need to play, let's say, Hanalis, for example, that also goes against the search, I believe. So you can only search for Aqua Force clan-specific units and then also like a Tier Dragon. But Hanali isn't one, so that might hurt your Algos search at that point, so keep that in mind. And Nicholas, at first I thought it was nice with Nicholas because it becomes 11k. I'm like, ooh, makes 11k numbers, so now it can hit 11k Vanguards against those matchups too. But it's okay because like if you have so many units that are only just hitting 11k, 15 or 16, 18, but not hitting over another trigger threshold, those units become useless once there's another trigger involved. I could not stress this enough, but it's like really frustrating with Aqua Force because it's been always a problem. So you want to keep that in mind. You can play more Alanios if you want to have more of a superior call base type of build too, so that way you can reuse some of the Great 2s more easily. Just keep in mind that it uses Counterblast and Soul as well. You could also use Diantha in the Grade 1 slot to do the same thing without worrying about the Soul, and then you have a booster at this point. So it might be useful because you have Reprise Strike Dragon in the mix now. And I guess that leads me into the Grade 1s as well, because I've considered not only the Hanalis, but I've also considered Urjula, for example. Urjula gives resist basically to the unit in front, essentially. So because you need a booster for Reprise Strike Dragon, you can just put it behind him, and it'll be a protected column if they have to deal with certain attacks right at that point. But you still need to be boosted, so if your opponent has a certain disruptive play that also affects your booster, then you're kind of out of luck. So, and also, how many Urjula are you going to play? Are you going to play one and maybe search with it, hopefully with something? You don't draw as aggressively compared to like a jumbo turn, so you might not see it as often too. So little things like that I was thinking. You can use Rolex if you want to be defensive like I did, or you can take them out. You can commit more to Narissos. You can commit more to Wheel Assaults. Also, Penguin Soldier is something that I consider because you can countercharge on the 4th battle. That might be actually really helpful because if you're doing Tidal-bore and you only have one counterblast, Tidal-bore is free. I want to stress that out too. It's free, so you don't have to worry about like needing any counterblast. As long as you have other units like Pursuit Assault, Coral Assault, your turn's gonna be still like hurting. It's just when you need the counterblast for Reprise, that's when it comes about. But if you have like cards like Penguin Soldier, you can reuse that second counterblast for another restander, or a card like Alania, for example, if you call it mid-battle at the sense. So there's flexibility in that. I think for now, that's really what's on my mind as a couple options and suggestions that you can try out. Right now, the deck is pretty much an alpha build. There's so much that we need to experiment. I think Japan just got History Collection too. So we're yet to see premium action too. And if we see deck lists and see what other decks really benefit from History Collection, because I feel like other Accel clans might have something that isn't as obvious to, and Thavas may struggle against that too as well. So I'm always keeping an open mind to that, and you just never know that there's a Protector or Force clan that just needed something to make it kind of like broken. Right? So whatever that is. And if you like the video, you know, give it a like, share it with a friend too. And if you want to support the channel, use the affiliated links with 50 Card Shop, Trading Card Mint, and TCG Player. And if you want to book a METAFY session with me, feel free to do so as well. And on to the next one, amigos.